Welcome everybody. I'm Rebecca Miller and I am a culinary herbalist here in the Kansas City area. I've been teaching culinary and herbal classes for over 35 years. I've taught within the Kansas City, Missouri charter school system. I have had classes for adults at the Culinary Center of Kansas City, at Whole Foods Market, and of course I've been excited. We just had finished up our summer camp at the Casey Farm School. So you've picked up your kit from Casey Farm School, and in that kit you're having a butternut squash and an onion, a few sprigs of a few leaves of fresh sage, and I'm going to teach you how to make butternut bisque. For our butternut bisque today, we're going to have, of course, the butternut squash you picked up, along with onion and some fresh sage. And all you need in addition to that is water or some kind of broth. I have vegetable broth today. You could use chicken, beef, mushroom broth, or even as simple as water. And then you'll have spices of your choosing, depending on what kind of soup you'd like. And you'll have salt and pepper. So that's it. I mean, this is the simplest, most wonderful soup. As a matter of fact, I've used this soup and I make many variations of it, and I call this cream of anything soup because you can use this same technique for cream of carrot soup, asparagus soup, potato soup, and you listen to the surface. You can hear how hard the squash surface is. We have the acorn squash, we have the delicata, and it's a little softer, but it's still got a pretty firm outside. That helps protect the meat on the inside to have these hard shells. This one is called a spaghetti squash. And when you steam this or bake this squash, split this in half, steam it or bake it, and you spoon out the insides, all of the insides of the squash come out looking like noodles. So it's a wonderful thing if you want to if you're cutting down on eating pasta, you can even use this squash for your pasta. And of course, this time of year, we need a pie pumpkin, and this is in the same family. All of these are squash. So let's see how to use some of these squash, okay? So when people are using winter squash, that's the class of all of these that we looked at, they're going, how am I going to use this? It's got this hard surface. You know, it is a big challenge. And what I always like to tell people first is I like to get a flat surface where I don't have things rolling around, and you know, that lessens the chance of something slipping or me cutting myself or you guys cutting yourself. So first I just get those off as carefully as I can, and I will make a cut down the middle so that nothing is sliding, you know, off of the board, and I can control that. And down the middle it goes. And then usually what I like to do is just cut these into about 1-inch sections, and then I'll show you how to peel this really hard skin off the surface. You got to have a sharp knife. Paring knife is what I like to use. And believe it or not, for this technique, you're going to actually cut towards yourself and your hand. But the big key, see how far back my hand is on that piece of squash? And so the idea isn't to take all of the skin off in one slice, but just a small part that you can manage. Look, just come up through, and that's just a small piece. You know, we're not taking the whole thing off at once. Just be patient, go slow. Now those skins could be boiled and made into a nice vegetable broth. Add some onion, add some garlic, add some spice, because there will be a lot of nutrients still in the skin, and this orange color gives you this wonderful nutrient called beta carotene. And so for this time of year, it's one that really helps your immune system. All the squash helps build the immune system and keeps you warm. All right, so the next step is to just get these into a cube shape that'll be easy to first saute with onion, and then later they'll simmer in their nice broth till they're soft. But so I like to get them into about a 1-inch cube or so. Now I've got to show you how to finish up and get the goodies out of this part of the squash. All right, so we're going to do the same thing. We're putting this flat side down on the board so nothing rolls around. We don't have the danger of hurting ourselves. Look at that. These can be saved even and dried and then planted for the garden next year. So you could, if you decide you enjoy the taste of butternut squash, I suggest you become a seed saver. Save those seeds. Oops. Whee! And throw them all over the kitchen. The process then at this point is exactly the same. Is you just cut this part of the squash into the sections, and you'll of course remove the hard skin, and all of that's the same process again, with just going slow, a little at a time. Take that hard skin off till the entire squash is processed and ready for cooking. So the next challenge we have is to get this onion get this skin off and get it diced and get it into anything we're using. So I'm going to show you a pretty nifty trick I learned from one of my teachers a long time ago. So here is the rootlet side, okay? And this, of course, is the stem part, and you know what an onion looks like, and then later it also blossoms into a beautiful onion flower. But it has this dry paper skin once they're harvested, and the farmer has to age these, in bins and get them ready to be sold to us. Once we have them, now how do we do it? So I cut it straight through from the root side, clear through the stem side, just straight down, as close as you can make it. And then I turn them down so they won't tip and wobble around, so they're easier to work with. Then what you do is you cut off the stem side just straight down, just, pretty easy. And again, the onion, this part of the onion could go into your soup stocks or to compost. Peel back that hard skin. And a lot of times the skin will take off that very first thin layer of onion right underneath the skin. And I let that happen because I use, like I said, all these parts for soup stock, or they go back and enrich the earth in that compost. So then we have, with the root end intact, you have kind of like a little handle here. And this is a Japanese vegetable cutting technique, and you don't want your knife to cut through the root end, but you bring your knife just right up to the root end. See how close it's coming without cutting through the root. So there's our crescent shape. And the reason it's called a crescent cut is these, before they're diced, are these beautiful little slivers, and they look like a crescent moon. So from the crescent moon shape right here, we're going to use our dice. And you cut right through, you hold all of that rootlet side as your kind of handle and support and brace, and you just cut right down, and look at how it all just comes off in a perfect dice. Ready for anything you're going to use. Then at the very end, I turn it this way. See how there's a lot of onions still left in a dice available. So I cut that end, and all you have left is this little tiny bit of the root. Now it's easy to dice right from there. So this kind of cuts down too on some of the tears. I'll tell you, it's a fast way to dice. And all right, there's our onion, and now let's get to cooking. Next step is just getting everything all put together, and I'm going to go ahead and heat my This is a stainless steel soup pot, or Dutch oven they're called sometimes. And I'm going to go ahead and add olive oil to this, the bottom of my Dutch oven. Enough to coat the bottom. And we'll let this heat up a little bit because I like to get the onions started. Now, the way we're making this today is with vegetable broth, the butternut squash, onion, and some salt and pepper. So if you're vegan, the way we're making it today works perfectly. If you're a vegetarian and you could add a little more cream to it, you could also start your onions in butter if you choose. You could use a combination of oil and butter. I've used vegetable stock today, but you can also use chicken stock, beef stock, onion stock, mushroom stock. So the variations on that are endless. And at the very end, if you wish to add a little heavy cream or half and half to make the soup quite rich, you'll serve it in your serving bowl, and you could even put a little dollop of creme fraiche or sour cream and some wonderful, beautiful fresh herbs on top to garnish, or some croutons, some bread, or some toasted seeds would even be nice. So you can see this is getting hot. You can even hear the oils, and it starts to move, and you'll see a little wave in the oil as it gets hot enough to add your vegetables. And you know that, of course, when you hear it hit the pan and it's sizzling. You don't want that to hit the pan and not hear any sizzling. You want that to hit and start to sear the flavor into the onion with as high a heat as you can get by without burning, of course. And one way you do that is to watch the food that you're cooking pretty carefully. When I've found over the years, believe me, I'm well over 60 years old. I've cooked for many, many years, 45 years, and it's not a good situation to leave your food once you start, your meal preparation or your dessert, or in this case, the soup. It's real tough to leave that on the stove and go tend to one more thing or do, so it's really a great idea to just devote a little time to cooking. I will brown these till they get just a little bit of brown color on the onion, and then that's when we'll add the butternut squash. And so I'll add it from what we prepared a little bit ago, and I'll just do the same process. I'll begin to let the oil coat, of course, these cubes by keeping them busy and stirred in the pan so nothing burns. You just want to have that watchful eye when you're cooking these wonderful foods. We're now developing some flavor and caramelization on the outside of these vegetables. And soon, when we cover it with the broth or water, we're going to develop another flavor, because that's going to then slowly simmer, and all of the nutrients from the vegetables will come out into the cooking broth and make a lovely soup. At this point, we would add our spices. If you're so inclined, you would use a curry powder. If your food is inspired by the taste of Indian cuisine, here is where we will salt. And I use a sea salt. I use something called real salt, and I'm going to use 2 teaspoons approximately here with this amount of vegetables, and probably about 1 teaspoon. I'm going to use black pepper here on this one. And this is the stage where you develop other flavors with herbs and spices. You can then add them at the end with a little, as I said, sour cream, butter, some either a pinch of dried herbs over the top, or cut some right from your garden. I wish you could smell all this, everybody. We will add our vegetable stock, and I have 4 cups here, and that's going to be just about perfect for this amount of squash, and that covers that squash perfectly. I'm going to go ahead and put about 2 cups of water in over the top. Now I'm going to keep this on high. My burner is going to stay on high. I'm going to cover this pot and bring all of this to a rolling boil. All right, so our squash has cooked, depending on the size of the cubes that you've prepared, anywhere from about 15 to 20 minutes. Just simmer that. And the very last step in this process is you could use a potato masher, you could use a food processor if you have it. I like to use an handheld immersion blender. And then you're going to emulsify all of this. Be careful, keep the immersion blender under the surface so you don't get any hot liquid up on your skin. Once your butternut bisque is just right, it's time to serve up your bowls of soup. Today I garnished this soup with a sprig of fresh sage from the garden, but use your creativity to garnish your soups in any way you desire. You can use fresh chopped herbs, dollop of sour cream, a splash of cream, toasted seeds of any kind, or a sprinkling of spices. This is just the perfect fall food, warming, strengthening, and nourishing. It makes a glorious way to start your holiday meals too. I hope you enjoy this recipe today and for years to come. In the meantime, I want you to stay healthy, stay well nourished, and stay safe. You're welcome into my kitchen anytime.